All right, so I welcome you all into this dellboomi session. In the last session, we talked about the what we actually talked about in the last session.
Deployment.
Yes, we talked about the packaging the process and deploying the process, right? And when we package the process, right, many other dependent components are also packaged along with that packaging process, and then we do the deployment, right? For any deployment to happen, what do we need to have? We need to have an environment, right? And there must be some runtime attached to it, right?
Yeah.
But here I have a quick note. The note is, this is a trick question. We can do deployment to an environment without runtime also. This is important. So what I'm saying is we can do deployment on an environment without runtime also. Even that is possible. Okay, but that does not help much. So what I'm trying to say is, let me go back to the platform. Okay, here is our platform. So the point I'm trying to make is, if I go to the atom management, let's say I create a new environment and the environment name is test. The classification is test. Do we have any runtime attached to it? No, right? We don't have any runtime attached to it. This is kind of an orphan environment, right? So with prod, we have one runtime. With dev, we have another runtime, but with test, we don't have any runtime. So how do we go about it? We go to the build tab. This is the process we have been working on. We'll say create package deployment. Okay, I'm not writing any notes and all that stuff. We'll packaging is done. And now from here on, I'll take forward and I'll just do the deployment. While doing the deployment, I'm selecting the environment. Okay, now the version is 2.0, right? Yesterday, the one which we created was 1.0. Review, deploy. So the deployment is done. What I'm saying is the deployment is done. So if you see, the deployment has happened on the test environment, but do we have any runtime attached to it? No, right?
No.
So this is a trick question which some interviewers might ask you, right? That we can do the deployment on the test environment, or I mean any environment which does not have any runtime attached to it. And the moment you attach the runtime to it, okay, so let's say later on now what you do is you attach some runtime to it. Yeah, the moment you will attach a runtime to it, all those processes which were deployed to an environment will move to the or will be available or will be deployed on that runtime as well. So what I'm trying to say is, let's say this is a dev environment, and in this dev environment there is an atom with the name April batch dev atom. And if I look at the things here, I can see some deployed processes, right? Yes. So now what's going to happen is, let's say I come here and I detach it. Right. So this dev environment becomes an orphan environment. So with test, what I'll do is I'll go and I'll attach this April batch dev atom. Now, if you come here, can you see that process is automatically available over here? Yes. All right. So these are the small things which you need to take care of or which you need to be aware of. Uh, so any questions from anyone about this process so far, except error handling? We did so many things. We added so many shapes.
Yeah. One question I had that I'm not getting how can we deploy process with environment which has no runtime attached in it?
Yeah, I mean, because
That I'm
the
not getting.
deployment needs an environment, first of all, and even we have environment, it BOOMI allows you to do the deployment.
It means and it can be either test or
No, we
prod.
cannot. No, we cannot test it and all. Okay, it's just like,
No, like environment classification, I'm
can be
saying.
anything. Yes,
Whether
it
it is
can be
of
anything.
environment. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So any advantage of
Yeah, the advantage
mm,
is, let's say you have done some development, right? And now you feel that this is a stable version of the code, right? So in that case, you can have
mm,
an environment where you can have that stable version of the code deployed later on at any, so you can always come back to the revision history and can go back. But the only problem with the revision history is the revision history is different for different components, right? So it is very difficult to remember the revisions of
yeah.
all the components. So whenever you feel there is a version of the code, right, which is stable, and now you want to store it somewhere, right? Because because here you will continue kind of doing the
Yeah.
deployment, right? One way is you create a copy of it, or other ways you just deploy to an environment as a backup copy. And later on, if any at any given time you want to get it back, you can get it from that environment.
Okay. And how can we create a copy? Yeah.
Copy of the code.
Yeah. Yeah. You just told me we
So the
can
copy
create a
is simple,
copy.
right? So for example, here we are into this process. Maybe let's say this folder itself, dellboomi 2021 batch, right? So let's say
Mm,
I'll create a new folder, hash backup. So it is there over here, hash backup. And what I'll do is I'll go to this dellboomi April 2021 batch. I'll say copy. I'll select the destination folder. Maybe in the destination folder, I'll go inside the folder which we have been working on, or this one, right? Backup.
mm,
Select that. If you want to copy all the subfolders also, check this checkbox and just hit OK.
okay. Okay. Thank
So now
you.
what's gonna happen is inside backup, you will have your this whole code base.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we want a stable version, yeah.
Yes. So now the next thing which I want to talk about, which is very, very important, you can expect a lot of questions around this in interviews, and it is very, very important to be understood even from the real time perspective, is about extensions. Okay. So this concept of extensions is not new. Anyone who has worked in real time on any of the tools or languages must have used this, but only the thing is the keywords or the names keep on changing in different tools and technologies. So now what happens is when we did the deployment and all, right, or the development, we configured some database connection details, right? Now let's say you have three environments: dev, QA, and prod. So just tell me one thing: will your connection details remain same across all the environments?
No.
It's gonna change, right? I mean, so the way you have multiple environments, even the people or the teams who will be like the database team or any other team, they will also have multiple environments, right? So now when you are kind of using your dev environment, ideally you would want to point to their dev environment, and when you move to QA, you would want to switch to their QA environment, right? Then only things will make more sense. Because like many of your freshers, just to let you know that whenever you're working in IT, right, for enterprises, they will maintain different environments, right? We do the development here, then we move the code to QA where the testing and all other activities are carried out. And once everything looks good, then we move the code to the production, and production is also called as a go live, wherein you will have your actual application deployed and consumed or used by the actual users, right? So now what I'm trying to say is the connection details might change from one environment to another. And not only connection details, there are a lot of things which can change. So for example, there is a directory path which we thought is the employees blah 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 while we were doing the deployment, or sorry, while we were doing the development. But later on for QA or prod, that path might change, right? We would want that to be configurable. So extension is as good as configuration. Or I would say, whenever you would want anything, any property, okay, whenever you would want any connection detail to be configurable. When I say configurable, I mean such that it can change from one environment to another, right? Or if you want that particular property or connection details uh, to be such that it can be changed on the fly at the runtime. So then in that case, extensions are very, very helpful. So extension is the concept of making the connection details properties configurable such that it can be changed while moving the code from one environment to another. So this concept will make or will facilitate you to make the connection details or the properties configurable so that it becomes easier for you to move your code from one environment to another. Also, this is helpful in all such cases when you want certain properties to be to be editable at the runtime without any redeployment of the code. Okay, so what I'm trying to say you is that extension is a concept which allows you to make your properties, connection details configurable, and you can make those configurations at the runtime, right? And you would not need any deployment, right? So if you remember, we talked about the cross reference table, right? Nobody asked me this question. Generally in my previous batches, people have asked all these questions. So we made use of a cross reference table for wherein for A1, maybe we selected some salary, let's say 25,000 or 35,000, whatever it is. I told the beauty of the cross reference table is that it can be changed on the fly. Yes. The beauty of the cross reference table is it can be changed on the fly. What does that mean? That means the values which are there in the cross reference table are editable. We can create new values, we can update the existing values, or we can delete the existing values on the fly. But did we actually do that so far? We did not do that, right? So extension is the concept which will make or which will help us to achieve that, right? So whenever you want an ability such that you are able to change the properties at the runtime, then you have to make use of concept of extensions. So in different in some other tools, you might have heard of concept of properties file. Have you heard of anything like in Java? There is a concept of properties file. So what happens is, let's say you write some JDBC code to establish the connectivity with the database. So when you write that code, so you would want to connect with different database, right? So in that case, what you typically do is you would write a generic code and certain properties which is going to change from one database to another. You will keep those configurable in such a way that those values are read from a properties file, and you can have a different property file for different databases or different environments, but your code is not going to change. So the point I'm trying to make is we developed some code, right? So typically, once you're done with the development, you would not want to make any changes in the code just because you want to move the code from one environment to another. Ideally, that's not what we do, right? So what you would want to do is you would want to use the same code when you move from one environment to another, right? So how do you, so what I'm trying to say is, first of all, we should know how do we move from one environment to another. And even before that, what we need to understand is, while we move from one environment to another, we cannot have the everything same in dev running in production, because your connection details might change, the values of certain properties might change. So as a developer, you need to make sure you identify all such property, all such connection details, and make them extensible with the help of extensions. So if you make them extensible, that means these value can be later on extended while we move our code from one environment to another, or even within the same environment, those values can be modified. I'll explain you what I'm talking. Okay, I know many of you might not be able to absorb what I'm speaking, but I'll explain you what I'm talking. So let's talk about disk. In disk, we had some directory, right? So generally, you know, it is not mandatory that the directory will remain same. This directory might change from one environment to another. And even when you will work in real time projects, you will see this directory might be empty like this. They will deliberately leave it empty. I mean, even this is a question in the interview, sometimes it is asked, how do you make sure that extensions are used by the processes? So how do you make sure? So the only way we can make sure is just write some dummy connection details. Okay. So if you want to impose your developers to make sure that they really use extensions, then do not write actual connection details while establishing the connectivity or while configuring the connection. Just write some dummy details. What do I mean by that? So now in this case, I go back to the disk. Do I have any directory path defined? No, right? We don't have any directory path defined. So how should we go about it? If I'll try to run it, should it fail? Okay, I go here. Did it fail or not? It did fail, right? You can see the control going to the cache, and in the shape source data, I can see the error message. The error message is directory does not exist. Yes or no? So that means something went wrong, right? Because we didn't give the directory. Now, how do I make sure that extensions are used, or how do I use extensions? So if you observe this tab, there is a first option with the name options, then extensions, then add note, then show navigation, and then arrange. So here we'll move on to the second one, which says extensions. Can you see you have different things which you can extend? What all you can extend? Connection settings, partner settings, dynamic process property, object definition, data maps, cross reference table, and PGP. These all things are extensible. Now, when I talk about disk, I can extend. What all can I extend? Directory.
Directory.
And that's what we need to extend right now. And if I go to the database, there are a lot of things which I can extend, right? I can extend driver type, I can extend username, password, host, port, DB name. There are a lot of other things which you can extend. It's up to you, right? So, and I will say, okay. So when I check these checkboxes, I am just ensuring that all these properties which have been selected under the extensions are extensible now, and these can be changed on the fly. So these are more like parameterized now, and you can pass those parameters on the fly. So what do I mean by that is, so now when I go to the testing of this, I'll save this stuff. So you see, you get a message, process gets saved, your extension gets saved. Now, if you see here, this is the atom, right? And here, do you see there is a drop down test extensions where you can set some path. Okay, so when I select disk, it says use connection component value. That is the setting by default. But if you want to override that, you can uncheck this and you can write employees. Okay, so what you're trying to do is, there was certain property which was kind of extended, right? And you are doing a testing. While doing the testing, you want to override that property. Right now, we are not talking about the deployment and all. We are not talking about moving the code from one environment to another. Even when you're testing, all such values which were extended can be passed on under this section called as test extensions, right? Now, if you go to the cross reference, do you see anything over here? No, but you do have a cross reference table in your process. Why don't we see anything like there? Why does it say there are no extensible cross reference tables?
We didn't opt it like in extensions before only you should uh, give
The
if you
reason
go
why
to
it is not visible,
extensions
if we go to the extensions, there was a section cross reference table. We had to
you just
check
select.
this checkbox. We had to check this checkbox. If you guys remember, we made use of one cross reference table to map the grade to the salaries of the employee. Now, if I want to make it configurable, I have to ensure that I check this checkbox. Now I do this, I save all the stuff. I will again come to the testing part of it, test extensions. Okay, I will say the directory as the employees. Okay, I'll now jump onto the cross reference table. Can you see you have an option to override? And now instead of 25,000, if like I want, let's say want to make 30,000 or something else, I can do it, right? If other I want to make it, let's say only 10,000 instead of 1 lakh, I can do it. But just understand one thing, whenever you're making these changes, you're not changing the values which are residing in the component configuration. I mean, you are not changing those values. You are just making sure that instead of using those values which are configured under the connection configuration, you make use of the values which are passed at the extension level. Please do not assume that when I modified this value for other from 1 lakh to 10,000, this would have made a change in the cross reference table configuration. It would not do that. It is only the case that these value will be used for this specific execution. So let's say I run the test. It is saying extension saved. Now this time we don't see any error so far. The test is being executed. Okay, everything looks smooth. There are no errors as such. So if you see here, the control hasn't gone to the try catch branch. That means everything has worked absolutely fine. So I'll see the output over here right after the map shape, that what went as an input to the database connector. Can you see instead of 1 lakh, now the value which is going is 10,000. If you remember, for the employee 101, we were not sending the grade, and we established some logic such that it picks up the value which is mapped for other, right? And for other, earlier the value was 1 lakh, and now you made it 10,000. And this, for this specific execution, the value which we can see is 10,000 instead of 1 lakh. And the reason why it is happening so is because while you tested this process, you configured certain value of extensions, and that value is going to come into the picture. Now I just close it, come back. Okay, where can I find my cross reference table? I can find under component explorer, isn't it? Can you see the value here is 10,000 or 1 lakh? It's still 1 lakh, right? So the point I wanted to convey is that whatever changes were made, that is only applicable for that specific execution. That's not going to change your actual components. So for example, for disk, I configured a directory like the employees. That does not bring a change in your actual uh, component configuration, right? Any questions so far?
Sumit, you told that we can write dummy code. So where we can write dummy code, like here,
Like,
while
like when I said dummy means you can leave it empty or you can write like this. Because when you will write like this,
yeah, literally write dummy connection. Yeah.
yeah, I mean dummy, it's not mandatory that you write dummy. Dummy means something which is not going to work unless we pass some values in the extensions. So that way you are bound to use extensions.
Okay.
Okay. Now there can be a interview question that how can we run the code in the build tab on a production environment without deploying the code. I'll repeat. The question is, how can you run a process on a production environment, right, without deploying the code? So see, when I want to run it on the production, what I would want is, I would want to understand that what are the connection details for the production database. I want to understand what is the path and all. And those things you can override in the extensions and you can run it, isn't it? So this extensions give you the flexibility to run the same process on different environments, even from the build tab. All right. So now another important.
Can you repeat, like, I'm not.
I'm saying, let's say this is the code, right? Now
Yeah.
the same code you have to run on, let's say, different environment. Okay.
Yeah.
So for different environment, you will have a different atom. Now what I'm trying to say is this, you can run this. So let me show you like this. Okay. So how many environments do we have? We have one more, right? So now let's say this is your test environment and this is your dev environment. Now on, if you want to run the same code on test environment, so what is going to change? The only thing which can change is the disk connection values or the Oracle database connection values, right? So you can override those values over here and the same code you can run on dev or QA or prod or any environment for that matter.
Only by giving the connection, different connection details.
Correct.
Yeah, but the atom.
Even you can select the atom now. See.
Of production environment.
Yes. You can select the atom of production environment. You're right. Okay.
How? Okay, there only.
In the drop down only.
Yeah, yeah.
One more observation you guys should make is, I don't know, like these are small things. Many people are not aware. We go to the atom management. How many atoms do we have? Overall. 1, 2, 3, 4. Annagaru mute lo elali. Okay. Okay, so what I was saying is, right now, how many atoms do we see? We see 1, 2, and there is another one, 3, right? So we have 3 atoms. We go back to the build tab. Guys, these all are very, very minute things. Please try to make a note of this. How many atoms do you see over here?
4. No, 2.
I was expecting this answer from someone. 4. Anyhow, it's not 4. Okay, there is a section recently used and there is a section. Can you see? Test environment and the atom. Unattached atom also you can see over here. You can see only 2, right? But what about the atom cloud? Why can't you see that? So there was one more, no, this one atom cloud. Why can't we see that? Answer for that is any atom which has a production classification cannot be used in the build tab. So I made certain statement sometime back and I'm myself contradicting that statement. So there is a caveat that you cannot use any atom which has the production classification. Please understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying any environment. I'm saying any atom which has a production classification cannot be used to test your processes in the build tab. So your atom cloud has which classification? Production classification, right? So this is not available for testing of the processes. But if your production environment was using a local atom, then you could find that atom available for testing even in the build tab. This is only exception with the atom clouds, because the atom clouds with the production classifications are not available in the build tab for testing your processes. Is that clear?
Okay, but how to use this atom? How to execute the process with production environment?
Only you have to deploy and then you can use. You cannot do it from the build tab. So if you want to test anything, you'll have to do the deployment, proper deployment, the way we did yesterday, and then only you can test it. So I'll explain you. Okay, I'll explain you that part. But before that, I just want to observe you few more things. So we configure different environments, dev, test, production, and all. So let me go to the test environment once again. You can see there is an environment name here, then there is an environment ID, there is a classification, then there are certain roles, then there is attachment. Can you see there is another important thing called as environment extensions? Yeah. So it is saying environment extensions. So extensions are being maintained at the environment level, right? So this is tied to an environment. So this extensions is going to change from environment to an environment, right? So for production, it will have its own environment extensions. For dev, it will have its own environment extensions. So what I'm trying to say is, so this environment extensions, as the name suggests, these are tied to an environment. Now I go to the test and I click on environment extensions. What does it say? There are no extensible processes deployed to this environment. Do we have anything deployed to this environment? Yes, we do have, but then there is not a single process which has even a single of the properties extended. So that's why it gave us a pop-up with a error message. Now what do we do is, in the extensions, did we extend certain properties for disk, for cross-reference table and all, right? I will create a package component again. So whenever you have to do a redeployment with some new changes, you have to create a package and then do a redeployment. So I'll say this includes enablement of extensions. Please make sure whenever you do deployment, right, you make these kind of notes. So when you're writing these notes, people will feel that you have worked in real time, right? Generally, people who will fake their experience will avoid these kind of small things. But these things will have a high significance when you're working for enterprise, because there will be a lot of people working in parallel. So these notes become important. You won't remember what you did 3 months back, but then these notes will help you to understand that which individual version of the process corresponds to which particular fix, right? So this includes enablement of extensions. I'll package. So packaging is done. One way is I can continue my deployment from here, or else what is the other way? If let's say I want to just close it, what is the other way to continue my deployment?
You can move the process resetting.
You have to click on manage.
We have to click on deploy, because okay, deploy. Under deploy, you have packaged components, right? Can you see your package? Go to this gear icon, deploy, and let's say you want to deploy on test itself. Deploy. Deployment is done. Now I'll go to the atom management. So now you have to understand in the test, you will have you cannot have two versions of the process running at the same time, right? So now the one which we will have is the version number latest, that is 3.0, right? So I will come to the environment and I'll go to the environment extensions. Now, do you see that warning is not available anymore? Yes, environment extensions. Now here there is a process level filter. How many processes do we have as of now? Only one, right? Then in this process, you can override the value of disk. You can override the value of database. Okay, you will see only those options which were extended in the build tab, right? Now, if you go to the cross reference table, do you see the option to override? Yes. So you can come here and let's say you check this checkbox override, right? So for example, you feel that this value should not be there or you want to add another value. You can do all those stuff over here. You can do all this over here, right? And whenever you make these changes here, you will see the audit logs also. Right now, you don't see any audit logs because nothing has been changed so far. I'll say okay. So when I'll say okay, you will get this pop-up extension saved. Another important thing is you go to this atom, and here there'll be an option extension last updated. I have personally seen there have been incidents when we were doing the go live for some project, and you would see that extensions were not getting updated. Sometimes it happens. So you can restart your atom, you can detach your atom and can try to attach again, but you have to make sure that your extensions get updated over here. Yeah, extensions got updated. Now what do we do, guys? We'll go back to the environment extensions. Can you see there is an audit log, date, time, audit log type is extensions, action is edit. What is a new value? So you can see here, this is the complete XML which defines the stuff that you're trying to override. Can you see here there is a cross-reference rows and 60,000. This is the new value you're trying to pass. This is a certification question. Where can you find the audit logs? Audit logs are only available when you override the extensions or when you modify the extension values. Yes. Now in this case, what exactly did we override? Did we override anything? Yes, we had overridden the cross-reference table wherein we added a new grade, isn't it? So this way you can do the changes in the values on the same environment and even when you move from one environment to another. So let's say you go back to your deployments. So now the question is, right now my code is deployed on test, right? And I want this code to be moved to production. How should we do it? Should we go to the build tab and deploy on production once again? Ideally, that is not the correct way. The correct way is you should always promote your code. So once you deployed your code on dev, from there on, it should be always promotion. Promotion means the same version should go to QA, the same version should go to prod. You cannot afford to go back to the build tab and deploy on test the way we did just now. That is the wrong approach. Okay, so ideally what you should do is, now you have deployed on test, you found that everything works fine. You go to this gear icon and then there is an option deploy to different environment. And let's say I want to deploy to prod. Okay. So you will give the message. This is the process which has extensions enabled, all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So now the code has been moved to prod from test, and it is the same packaged component, right? It is also 3.0. It is also 3.0, right? But what would have happened if I would have gone to the build tab and try to do the deployment? It would have created a new package component, isn't it? So you should always promote the code in this way, right? Once you feel that it is working fine, you come to this gear icon, deploy to different environments, and you can promote your code. Do not go back to the build tab. So there also you will get an option to do the deployment straight away, but then that will auto increment the version, which is not the right way. You should have same version of the code running across the environments, right? Just to make sure that you have the integrity established. Any doubt so far? So now what we'll do is we'll go back to the atom management. We'll go to prod. We'll go to the environment extensions. Now, what do you see? Will we be seeing that new grade which we added in the environment extensions over here for prod?
Wait, no, I guess.
So we don't see it, right? Because those extensions were specific to that environment, right? Now for this environment, if you want to make any changes, you can do it over here, right? And that's how you can make your process to run with the different connection details, right? So for example, now my production connection details would be different, right? So I can go here, I can select Oracle, or maybe this one, if you want to override, you override, or you leave it as is. Maybe you want to override the username, you want to override the password, host, port, database name, all these things you might want to override, right? So you can just uncheck this and you can pass those details. If you do not uncheck this, then this is going to take the one which is residing in your process, right? Which were given during the process configuration itself. And please understand one thing, one important thing. Whatever extensions you're setting over here, right? Whatever extensions you're setting over here, that is confined to the build tab only. That is applicable only for the testing of the process. So some people might feel that, I had given some extension value over here that should automatically come in the environment extensions once I deploy the process. That's not going to happen. These values which you're using are restricted to the test mode. These are not going to get carried forward at the time of deployment. This is a very, very important concept. You need to make sure that you understand it well. Very easy thing, but still you should have a good idea, right? You should not get confused about it. Any questions so far from anyone? All right. So we'll go to the process reporting, right? If you remember yesterday, we talked a little bit about process reporting. Give me a moment, guys. I'll just plug in the charging in my laptop. All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Can you see some of the executions which has been happening? We scheduled some process yesterday and it is still running. Yeah. So if you see under executions, there are different filters. Past 24 hours. So in past 24 hours, there have been a lot of executions which have got kicked off, isn't it? Yes. So this is going to happen in real time also. You will have a lot of instances. And now let's say someone came to you and said that Okay, boss, this particular order ID or this particular employee ID is not visible in the database. What should we do? I mean, maybe a ticket comes to you and they want you to basically help them out that what went wrong over here. So how do you take care of that? So in that case, maybe something got errored out in your process. You might have received some notification, right? An alert which has the execution ID. So what you'll do is you will go to add filter. You will you can filter on the basis of atom. You can filter on the basis of process. You can filter on the basis of execution ID also. You can go here and you can just populate that execution ID over here and you will get only that specific process. So I'll just show you an example. So I'll take one of these executions. So the execution ID is going to be same or different for all these different executions.
Different.
Different.
This is going to change, right? Because execution ID is unique per execution. So if I'll pick up any random execution, I'll go here and there is an option called as view extended information, right? When you get into this, can you see there is some metadata which is about execution ID, process ID, atom ID, and deployment ID. I'll pick up this execution ID randomly. Okay, I'm just picking it randomly. Ideally, you should design your error handling in such a way that you get these execution IDs either logged into the database along with the error message, or it gets parceled as a part of the email alert which is sent to the team. Now let's say by some means you got this kind of execution ID. Okay, you know that the issue is with the execution which has an execution ID is equal to this, right? So what you will do is you will come here. Maybe you can say that this issue must have happened maybe in last 7 days, right? You will go and add a filter execution ID and it will populate that value and you will hit apply. So when you hit apply, can you observe that you are now pointing to that specific execution? So now out of thousands of executions which have happened, you want to point to the specific execution which actually has an issue. And how do you do that? See, one way is the timestamp and all that stuff, right? But the easiest way is you have the execution ID and you can point right to that specific execution which has an issue. Now, once you know that there is an issue, you can go to the logs. So in the logs, you can observe, right, how has been the process execution. You can see the process state also. This process state will give you the complete information that which all shapes got executed, right? Not only that, you can see the documents also, right? So this way, this execution ID will play a very vital role in, pointing to that execution, specific execution which went wrong or which has an issue. Are you guys following me? I mean, do you really understand the significance of execution ID? Why we were emphasizing on execution ID to be there as a part of that error message or error, payload? Any questions from anyone? So we started with a build. We configured certain shapes and components. We tested them out. We enhanced the logic. We did multiple round of testing. Once we felt that everything looks in place, we went ahead and carried out the deployment. So even to do the deployment, this is a two-step process. First, package your process. Once the packaging is done, then you go ahead and deploy your process. So once you deploy your process, you can kind of schedule your process, right? So you will schedule your process. Where do we schedule it? Under atom management. Go to the deployed process and you can schedule it. Right now you can go here, you can go on edit schedules, and here you can define the schedule. If you feel the scheduler needs to be stopped, you can stop schedule, right? And then there is a process reporting tab. This process reporting tab will help you to see the status of all the executions. Then we talked about extensions. Extensions make basically helps you to make certain properties configurable so that the values can be changed at the fly, right? In the same environment or across different environments. These extensions are maintained per environment level. You can override the connection details, dynamic process properties, cross-reference tables, and many other things. And these will make sure that your deployments and the promotion of the code from one environment to another is smooth. You also understood that when we are having the code, let's say in test, you should not go back to the build tab and redeploy the code to the another environment. Rather, you should promote the same version of the code from one environment to another. Another
Mm,
important just hold on,
and
okay? Give me a moment.
yes,
Another important feature you have is, let's say you're on test or maybe prod. Now you feel the code which you moved is not working. It has some issues. Then there is an option called as rollback. Okay. Now it does not give you any option to roll back because this is the only version you deployed on prod. But let's say if you were following all the standards, maybe wherein you must have, deployed version 1.0 first, then 2.0, then 3.0, then it would have given you option to choose the older version to which you would want to point back, right? So when I go here, I do a rollback. I don't see any options because this is the only version which is deployed to prod. Now let's say this is 1.0 and I'll say deploy to different environment and I'll choose prod for, I'm just showing it for an example. Now on prod, we have the version 1.0, right? Now you feel 1.0 is the wrong version, right? This is not working as expected. You go here, you go to rollback. So when you say it does not do a rollback automatically, you have to manually do it and you have to select the version to which you would want to point back. So I feel that I would want to point back to 3.0. It's done. So I'm back on 3.0. Yeah. Yeah, Priyanka, you were saying something.
how can we configure like in extension process dynamic process properties?
I'll show you that.
Okay. And for rollback, means we can, like, in any environment we can roll back.
Yes. In any environment, you can do a rollback.
Okay.
So you will have an option here. You will have an option here.
But only if it has more than one version, rollback option should be there, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you, let's say deployed only one version of the code, then what
Yeah.
it would roll back to. For
Yeah.
rollback to happen, it should have some history, right? That to which
Yeah.
previous version you want to do a rollback.
Yeah. And if we have one version deployed to prod and same version is deployed to test, then also we can roll back.
Yes, that's true, right?
Okay.
So we have 3.0 here, 3.0. So now once this 3.0 is deployed to both the environments, right? So these are kind of mutually exclusive. These environments are mutually exclusive. So let's say you go here and you do a rollback to 1.0. So now that 1.0 rollback is only applicable for prod. Your test remains intact.
Okay. Okay.
These all are important things to know, guys. You might need to give it a try. Like I am doing these all things day in and out. So I would recommend you that you explore all these options, try to deploy your process, try to schedule your process, try to see how that rollback is working. Once you see it yourself, once you observe things working for you will get more confidence. And I think you will be better placed because me doing it and you just observing it is definitely helpful to a certain extent. And post that you have to try it on your own and observe things, and that's where you start getting stuck, and basically you will come up with more questions also. All right, so I think we'll just take a pause over here. I don't want this session to be overwhelming. It's just a weekend. I just wanted to make sure that we meet since we missed few sessions last week. uh, and then we'll catch up on Monday. We are not going to meet tomorrow, so tomorrow will be enough. We will meet on Monday and we'll continue from here. Sushmita, if you want to stay back for 2 minutes, I just want to talk to you.
Yes, Sumit.